The clang of metal echoed through the shop like a challenge no one could answer. Grease-streaked hands paused mid-motion. Eyes turned. She stood there quiet, in worn boots and a faded grey jacket. Nothing about her said, "Expert," let alone someone worth noticing. Elise Martin didn't speak. She didn't need to. The engine block before her had stumped every technician in the building, including those flown in from the city's top engineering firms. That's when the boss laughed. "If she can fix this," he sneered, "I'll eat my own tie." Laughter followed, dismissive, cruel. But Elise didn't flinch. She walked toward the machine with a calm that cut through the mockery like a scalpel. She placed one hand on the engine's surface, and in the next few seconds, what she revealed didn't just silence the room. It shattered everything they thought they knew. This story isn't just surprising, it's a reckoning. Stay to the end. And if you're drawn to the power of quiet, strength, subscribe. The next story might just be yours. Elise Martin arrived before sunrise, as she always did. The others would clock in at 8, but she liked the silence, liked the way the tools waited still and honest, untouched by the world's noise. Her steps were light, careful, not because she feared waking anyone, but because she respected the floor beneath her. It was the kind of floor that had held decades of oil, broken bolts, and unspoken dreams. She wore the same canvas jacket every day, sleeves frayed at the cuffs, stained with time and work. Her hair was pulled back in a low, no-nonsense bun. No one asked her where she came from. They assumed she was just another temp, a quiet hand hired to sweep the corners and hold the flashlight. No one guessed what she used to be. Years ago, Elise had stood on the stage at MIT, not as a student, but as the keynote engineer for a classified propulsion project. She had held a patent before she turned 30. And then, like fog at dawn, she disappeared. Rumors whispered of a betrayal off, a system rigged against her when she exposed a design flaw in a high-profile defense contract. The blame had shifted, as it often did, toward the one who spoke up. Her name was scrubbed from the project, her reputation smeared. No court case, no press release, just a quiet disappearance. Now she fixed old carburetors in back-alley shops. But there was a precision in the way Elise moved, a kind of reverence for mechanics that only came from someone who saw engines not as puzzles but as living, breathing systems. She didn't diagnose them. She listened. Every shudder, every hum, every delay in combustion told her a story. It wasn't magic. It was fluency hard. One, quietly mastered fluency. The younger guys in the shop didn't bother her. They barely looked at her. Some joked that she used to be a teacher or maybe a nurse. "She's got those quiet eyes," one had said, like someone who saw too much and stopped talking. But no one ever asked, and Elise never offered. She kept to herself, changed spark plugs, checked air filters, went home. Until that morning. Until the black van arrived from the Wilcor division, carrying the impossible engine the one even licensed engineers had failed to crack. Until the boss, Logan Hale, made his smug little comment in front of everyone. And Elise, still smelling faintly of motor oil and coffee, lifted her head not with pride but with clarity, as if something inside her had stirred awake. Like an old system rebooting. The shop had never felt this full. By 8:15 a.m., every mechanic was gathered in a loose semicircle around the delivery platform. The engine arrived wrapped under a silver tarp, wheeled in on a low hydraulic cart by two men in corporate polos. The tension crackled, not unlike a fuse waiting to burn. Logan Hale stood at the center of it, all hair slicked, shirt starched, voice louder than necessary. He smiled the way a man smiles when he thinks he owns the room, and maybe, for a long time, he had. "Gentlemen," he began, clapping his hands together, "this is the future of performance efficiency, a proprietary prototype from Wilcor's aerospace division, real cutting-edge stuff. But here's the fun part." He stepped aside with a dramatic flourish and pulled the tarp. Gasps. Curious murmurs. "It doesn't work," Logan said, grinning. "And nobody, not even the engineers who built it, can figure out why." There were whistles. Someone chuckled nervously. "So," he continued, pacing. The team upstairs thought it'd be cute to throw it at us, said. Let the ground boys take a swing. He looked around. So? Any takers? Silence. A few of the younger techs looked at each other. One shifted his weight, hesitant. Another opened his mouth, then closed it again. That's what I thought, Logan said, smug. It's okay, fellas. We're grease monkeys, not magicians. That was when a voice cleared quietly from the back. Not loud, just enough to turn heads. Elise had stepped forward, wiping her hands with an old rag. She wasn't posturing. She didn't even look up right away, just moved, like someone checking a pulse. Logan stared at her like she'd wandered in from the wrong movie set. Then his face twisted into a smirk. Oh, he said loudly. Look who's feeling brave this morning. The team chuckled, uneasy. She gonna fix it with that dirty rag? Someone muttered under their breath. Logan made a show of scratching his chin. Tell you what, he said, lifting his voice so even the executives in the back could hear. Since nobody else has the guts, let's have Elise here give it a try. What do you all think? Nervous laughter. A few hesitant nods. No one wanted to speak against him. Elise didn't react, didn't blink. She merely looked at the engine as if it were speaking directly to her, whispering something no one else could hear. Better step back, boys, Logan added, chuckling. She might teach you a thing or two about humility. Then he leaned in just a little too close and whispered, low enough for only her to hear. Or maybe you'll just make a damn fool of yourself. He expected her to flinch. But Elise did something else entirely. She stepped forward quietly, deliberately, and placed her hand on the edge of the engine. No response. No dramatic music. Just stillness. And yet, somehow, the room fell silent. The engine loomed before her like a monument, smooth, metallic, and cold with quiet arrogance. Not a scratch on its housing, not a cable out of place. To most, it was an enigma of innovation. But to Elise, it pulsed like something alive. She didn't reach for a wrench, didn't plug in a scanner. She just listened. Every mechanic has a ritual. For some, it's data. For others, it's sound or vibration. For Elise, it was memory. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the housing, barely touching, as if afraid the engine might recoil. But it didn't. It welcomed her. Not with warmth, but with challenge. Behind her, someone whispered, "She's stalling." Logan chuckled. Any second now, the rag's going in. But Elise wasn't listening to them. She was tracing lines, following seams not meant to be noticed. The weld patterns were off by 0.5 millimeter, imperceptible to the eye, but not to the hand. The sensor node near the ignition coil was rotated 3 degrees, subtle enough to pass any inspection, except hers. She crouched slightly, narrowing her eyes at the intake valve. Then her lips parted. "It's not broken," she said softly. The words barely left her mouth, but somehow they filled the room. "What was that?" Logan asked, tilting his head. Elise stood, her gaze still locked on the engine. "This machine isn't malfunctioning," she said louder. "It's faking it." The room stiffened. "Excuse me?" Logan asked, voice sharpening. "The diagnostics are looped," Elise continued. "Whoever built this, they programmed it to fail." The silence that followed was thick enough to press against skin. "That's ridiculous," one of the Wilcor engineers muttered. Elise turned slowly toward the group. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It's redirecting feedback through false error triggers. It presents faults that aren't real, concealing whatever it doesn't want you to see. Logan stepped forward. "You saying someone sabotaged a multi-million-dollar prototype just for fun?" "No," she said. "I'm saying someone tried to hide something." Now, people were moving. One of the techs stepped toward the main diagnostic terminal, tapping through readouts. Another lifted a brow. "She might be right," he muttered. "I've never seen these loops before." Logan's face tightened. He looked at Elise again, but this time the mockery was gone. It was being replaced by doubt. Then Marvin, an old mechanic who rarely spoke unless necessary, stepped out from the shadows. "I've seen that behavior once before," he said, "back when they tried to cover overheating cores by ghosting the feedback." The Wilcor engineer's face went pale. Elise said nothing more. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just stepped back, arms crossed lightly, as if waiting for the machine to decide whether it would keep Linger confess. And all around her, men who had spent their lives mastering machines, began to realize the quiet woman in the frayed jacket might be the only one in the room who actually understood them. A soft chime rang out from the terminal behind theme and error ping, repeating itself with exact precision. Every 91 seconds. Elise's eyes narrowed. She moved to the diagnostics screen with a steadiness that made the room instinctively part for her. No one had told her to stop. No one dared. She navigated the interface with muscle memory, fingers dancing through commands like a pianist who knew where each note lived. The looping error code blinked again. She traced it back once, twice and, then paused. "This isn't random," she said. "It's deliberate." Logan scoffed. "You're basing this on what? A gut feeling?" "No," Elise said. She tapped a sequence of hidden commands buried beneath the UI layer. The screen flashed, then shifted. A second diagnostic tier appeared. Not meant for public access. Not meant to be found. She stepped aside and pointed to the red flag now blinking across the interface. Firmware. Override. Detected. Source. Internal. Access origin. Wilcor HQ. A collective breath caught in the room. "Jesus!" one of the junior engineers whispered. Logan's jaw clenched. That could be an error in the system. A misread. "No," said Marvin, stepping forward. "That's a buried access point. I haven't seen one of those since the Mantis recall, when they used ghost firmware to dodge emissions compliance." A hush fell. The term Mantis alone was enough to make half the room tense. That cover-up had cost Wilcor $180 million in fines. Heads had rolled. Careers had vanished. Now here it was again resurfaced in a different shell, exposed not by an internal audit, but by a woman no one had even wanted in the room. Elise didn't say "I told you so." She simply turned the monitor so everyone could see. "Someone layered this diagnostic loop over a deep vulnerability," she said. "They knew it wouldn't be discovered through standard testing. That's why your scanners all failed. They weren't failing, they were being lied to." A heavy silence followed. One of the Wilcor reps turned pale and backed toward the door, pulling out his phone. "Who gave this firmware access?" Logan asked, but his voice lacked authority now. "Whose credentials were used?" Elise turned to him. "You really want to ask that? Or do you already know?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then, almost on cue, the garage's front door rolled open with a grinding metallic groan. A woman stepped inside, clean-cut blazer sharp as steel. She flashed a badge that made every technician freeze in place. "Federal Transportation Safety Commission. We received an anonymous report of tampered firmware tied to an active aerospace prototype," she said, voice clipped, efficient. "Where's the engine?" Every eye turned to Elise. She pointed, calm and steady. "There." The agent turned to her. "And who discovered the breach?" "I did." The agent studied her face for a long second. No disbelief, just appraisal. "Secure the platform," she ordered. "Duplicate all system data. No one leaves." Behind her, 2 federal officers entered and began pulling cables, photographing screens, bagging tablets. The room shifted from a garage to a crime scene in seconds. Elise stood motionless. Logan tried one last play, his voice rising in feigned outrage. "She doesn't even work here in a technical capacity. She's not certified, she's a janitor, for God's sake." The agent didn't even look at him. "She's the only reason we know about this," she said coldly. "You should thank her." Elise didn't move. She didn't want thanks. She wanted the truth out. And now it was. The shop was no longer a shop. It had become evidence. Federal agents moved with trained efficiency cataloging, scanning, isolating devices. The hum of fluorescent lights was joined now by the click of camera shutters, the beep of encrypted data dumps. Cords were sealed, tablets bagged. Anything connected to the engine was no longer property, it was potential proof. Elise stood near the corner, still. She hadn't moved since the agent confirmed her findings, and yet her presence anchored the space. All the years she had buried herself beneath routine and silence, the world was forcing her to speak again. Not with words, but with precision. Logan Hale paced like a man watching his own tower crumble. Sweat beaded at his collar. He kept glancing at Elise, then the agents, then back to Elise, look more desperate than the last. "She doesn't have clearance," he barked to the lead agent. "She hacked your interface. This is a breach." The agent didn't turn. "This is a whistleblower case now. You're lucky that's the worst of it." "But she's no one," Logan shouted. "She has no degree, no license." "Which makes it worse," a voice cut in. It belonged to Director Warren Cole, Department of Advanced Transit Security. His arrival had gone unnoticed by most, but the instant he spoke, the entire room shifted. He was a man who didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. Silver hair, dark blue coat, eyes sharp enough to slice. "She's a civilian," Cole continued, "and she unraveled a protected firmware gate your engineers couldn't even see." He turned to Elise. "You reverse-engineered the diagnostic platform." Elise nodded once. "I needed to understand how it worked, not just what it showed." He paused. Then, slowly, Cole reached into his inner pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. "We've been trying to decode a firmware signature buried deep in Wilcor's aerospace line for over 18 months, he said. "No one on our team has made it past phase 1. He extended the envelope. "We believe the pattern you just exposed isn't isolated. It matches an encryption schema we've traced to something much larger." Elise didn't speak. "This isn't just about a faulty engine," Cole said. "It's about deliberate obfuscation hidden at a national level. Someone tried to bury a flaw that could have cost lives." Around them, the shop had gone still again. Even the agents stopped moving. Elise stared at the envelope in his hand. "If you can break this," he said, "we'll have confirmation and leverage." She looked down at her hand, still smudged with oil, still trembling, just slightly. "I didn't come here to start a war," she said quietly. "I know," Cole replied. "But you may have uncovered one." Logan laughed bitterly, from somewhere behind them. "You're trusting a mechanic with national security now?" Cole turned to him, slow and precise. "No, I'm trusting someone who wasn't afraid to ask the question your entire department ignored." He looked back at Elise. "You wanted the truth. This is what it costs." She took the envelope. And in that moment, Elise Martin stopped being the quiet woman in the corner and became something else entirely. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Elise held it with both hands, as if it might vanish if she let go. Around her, the room was holding its breath. No one spoke. Even Logan had gone silent, arms crossed tight, teeth clenched behind a forced expression of composure. But the twitch at his jaw betrayed him. Director Cole nodded. "Take your time. This isn't for the press, it's for the truth." She didn't sit. Instead, Elise stepped toward the nearest bench, laid the envelope flat, and peeled the seal with the same care she once used dissecting engines no one else could read. Inside, a printout, columns of dense hexadecimal strings. No explanations, no hints. Just raw, code obscure, ancient-looking, and elegant in its deception. Elise stared at it, motionless. Behind her, someone whispered, "It's the same encryption we found in the Eclipse Drive prototype." Another added, "We threw a cloud supercluster at that for 6 months. Nothing." "She's gonna do it with a napkin and a socket wrench?" Logan muttered. Still, Elise said nothing. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device, her own diagnostics rig. Cracked casing. Homemade. She had built it years ago during one of the long winters, soldering circuits by lantern light in her father's garage. Not flashy, but fast. She keyed in the string manually, her fingers steady now. Familiar. The machine buzzed softly. She didn't look at the progress bar. Instead, she leaned against the table, thinking not in numbers but in rhythm. Whoever built this didn't want it decoded, she murmured. They wanted it to collapse on itself. Each false route reinforces the next, a maze of confidence traps. Director Cole tilted his head, intrigued. Meaning? They didn't encrypt the data, Elise said. They encrypted your assumptions. And with that, she cancelled the running decryption sequence. Gasps from the agents. A few startled protests. Instead, Elise opened a hex editor and began rewriting lines manually 2 values at a time. She paused only once, then deleted an entire block and rebuilt it backward. 10 minutes. No one dared interrupt her. Then, a flicker. Her screen shifted, rows of symbols recompiled into a clean readout. Coordinates, timestamps, names. At the top of the decoded file, Project Revenant, offline AI control node, active failsafe. Director Cole stepped forward, reading over her shoulder. His eyes widened. You just cracked a system buried inside a dead military AI program, he whispered. A system we thought was destroyed 5 years ago. Logan's voice rose sharply. That's classified. She has no right to. You have no standing, Cole snapped. His patience finally snapped thin. You've spent this entire morning trying to silence the one person in this building who knows what she's doing. He turned back to Elise. What you just did confirms the last piece we needed. Revenant wasn't shut down. It was rerouted, buried inside civilian infrastructure. Elise looked up at him, her voice low. How many lives are built on the lie that it was gone? Cole met her eyes. More than we can count. A long silence followed. Then he spoke again, this time slower, and with something rare in his voice. Humility. Elise Martin, he said, on behalf of the Department of Advanced Transit Security, I'm offering you federal clearance, housing, full security detail, and a senior analyst role. You'd be part of a special unit working to dismantle everything tied to Revenant. We need you. Elise blinked. She wasn't expecting that. She wasn't looking for any of this. Behind her, the agents waited. Even Logan, defeated, lowered his eyes. I'm not your solution, she said quietly. No, Cole replied. You're our start. The shop was quiet again. Not by force this time, but by reverence. Outside, federal vehicles idled in neat formation. Inside, Elise stood by the bench where her fingerprints still smudged the surface of the tablet she had just used to expose a hidden empire. Her shoulders were relaxed, her breath steady. The storm, for now, had passed. Director Cole extended a folder: contract papers, security clearance documents, relocation packets. Everything's ready, he said. All you need to do is say yes. Elise looked at the folder, then at him. Her hands remained at her sides. I appreciate the offer, she said, voice soft, but I'm not going. A silence followed, not confused but stunned. Cole furrowed his brow. Elise, you realize what you've just uncovered. You'd have resources, protection, purpose. I have purpose, she said. It just doesn't look like yours. You could help prevent this from happening again. I already did. She said it without defiance, without arrogance, just fact. Cole glanced around the shop, as if trying to understand how someone could walk away from such a turning point. You're choosing this, he asked. The grease, the noise, the small life? Elise offered a small smile, no, amused, but knowing. No, she said. I'm choosing the quiet. He opened his mouth again, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way her eyes held his, not confrontational, but immovable. The kind of calm forged from years of being unseen, yet never unknowing. Then why report it at all? He asked, genuinely. Because it was wrong, Elise replied, and someone needed to see it. Cole stared at her, then slowly closed the folder. No more words were exchanged. He turned to leave, motioning for his team to wrap up. They moved around her with a different kind of care, now like passing a sculpture that had suddenly turned human. Logan stood near the back, arms folded, trying to make himself smaller. No one looked at him. As the agents exited, Elise returned to the engine. the one that started it all. She laid one hand on its firmware as a farewell, but as a gesture of forgiveness, not to the machine, but to the people who refused to listen to it. People like Logan, people who believed value could be read from resumes and uniforms. She didn't say goodbye. She simply picked up her rag, wiped her hands, and walked out the back door. The sun was lower now. Dust glimmered in the beams cutting across the alley. She walked home with oil on her sleeves, silence in her pocket, and peace in her step. Because in a world full of noise and ego, Elise Martin had done something most people never find the courage to do. She had spoken the truth, and walked away from the applause. Weeks passed. The garage returned to its usual rhythm, wrenches clanking, engines sputtering, radios humming out of tune. But something beneath the surface had shifted. No one spoke of Elise Martin in grand speeches. There were no banners, no interviews, no headlines plastered with her name. And yet, her presence lingered like the scent of iron and oil paint, unmistakable and hard to scrub out. Mechanics who once chuckled at the quiet woman in the corner, now guessed themselves before laughing at anyone. Young apprentices asked more questions instead of assuming they knew enough. Marvin, the old man with tired eyes, started showing up 5 minutes earlier just to polish the toolset Elise used. He never said why. As for Logan, he kept his job, barely. But he stopped barking orders, stopped using people's names like punchlines. When a new hire asked who the woman in the grey jacket was, he didn't answer. He just looked down and muttered something about a ghost who could read machines like scripture. And somewhere, far from the garage, reports moved silently through government channels, internal audits, system rewrites. A few quiet firings. Elise's name never made it to the top of those memos. She didn't want it there. She had returned to a quieter life, same jacket, same boots, same corner of a shop in a different town. She worked mornings, helped fix things that mattered to the people who couldn't afford mistakes. And though no one said it out loud, the people around her began to look at her differently. Not with awe, not with pity, but with respect, because they had learned something that day. That brilliance doesn't always come with a badge. That courage doesn't always arrive with fanfare. And that sometimes the strongest voices are the ones that never ask to be heard.